The bell above the door hadn't changed in 30 years. That was the first thing I noticed when I walked into Donna's salon that Tuesday morning. The same little brass bell, the same soft chime, the same smell of lavender and warm hair product that had greeted me every 6 weeks since my youngest started kindergarten. Some things stay constant. I used to find that comforting. I didn't find much comforting that morning. I had a folder in my bag, 11 pages, tabbed and flagged, prepared by a man named Walter, who had introduced himself to me at my neighbor's 4th of July cookout 8 months earlier. Walter had kind eyes and a firm handshake, and he'd told me he specialized in financial transitions for people at a crossroads. He said it exactly like that, crossroads, like he'd practiced it. I was 64 years old. My husband had been gone for 2 years. My house, the house where we'd raised 2 children, planted a garden, hosted 40 Thanksgivings, was worth more than I'd ever expected. And I was tired. I was just so tired of managing it alone. Walter had a solution for that. He called it a life estate arrangement. I would sign over the deed to a trust he managed, continue living in the house as long as I chose, and receive monthly payments that he described as more than comfortable. He said it was something he'd set up for dozens of women in my situation. He said the word women with a kind of practiced gentleness that I noticed but didn't examine closely enough. I had an appointment with his notary at 2 o'clock. Donna had been cutting my hair since 1994. She knew the name of every person I'd ever mentioned: my daughter in Portland, my son-in-law who I'd never quite warmed to, my grandchildren, my late husband, the woman at my church who I found irritating but tolerated because she brought good casseroles. Donna held 30 years of my life in her memory, the way some people hold photographs. She was finishing up with another client when I came in, so I sat in the waiting area with a magazine I didn't read and thought about the folder in my bag. 11 pages. I'd read them 4 times. I'd highlighted things I didn't understand and then looked them up and still didn't entirely understand them. My daughter had offered to look them over and I'd said, "No, don't worry about it. I have it under control." I don't know why I said that. I think I was embarrassed. I think some part of me knew that if I handed those pages to someone who loved me, they would ask questions I wasn't prepared to answer. "Dorothy?" Donna was waving me over. "Come on, honey, let's get you shampooed." I settled into the chair and let her drape the cape around my shoulders and tip me back toward the sink. The water was warm. I closed my eyes. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. I slept fine. She didn't say anything to that. Donna had known me long enough to know when fine meant fine and when it meant the opposite. We moved to her station and she started working through my hair with a comb, and I watched her in the mirror the way I always did. Her concentration, her quiet efficiency, the small frown she got when she was working through a tangle. The radio was playing something soft in the background. 2 other stylists were talking in low voices near the back. "You have somewhere to be this afternoon?" she asked. "A 2 o'clock appointment." "What kind?" I hesitated. "Just some paperwork, financial stuff." She met my eyes in the mirror, just for a moment. "What kind of financial stuff?" she said. "A life estate thing. A man I know, he manages trusts and—" "Hold on." She set down the comb. "What's his name?" "Walter Greer. He's a financial." "Dorothy." She said my name quietly, but her voice had changed. Something had gone flat in it. "Where did you meet him?" "At a neighbor's cookout." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. She picked the comb back up and continued working, but I could see in the mirror that her jaw had tightened. The small frown had deepened into something else. "How long have you been talking to him?" 8 months or so. He's been very patient, very thorough. He walked me through everything. "I need you to stay very calm," she said. Her voice was barely above a murmur. She leaned slightly closer, like she was checking the back of my hair. "And I need you to not react to what I'm about to say." My hand stilled in my lap. "There is a woman under the dryer behind you," she said. "3rd station down. Don't look. She's been sitting there for 40 minutes, and her color has been done for 30. She hasn't checked her phone once. She has been watching you since you walked in." I stared straight ahead at my own reflection. "I don't understand." "Walter Greer," Donna said, her voice still low, still calm, still moving the comb through my hair as if we were talking about nothing at all. "I had a client, retired school teacher, 67 years old, widowed, owned her home outright. She came in here 18 months ago and told me about a man she'd met at a cookout who had kind eyes and a firm handshake and who helped women in transition." My mouth had gone dry. "She signed," Donna said. "She signed, and 18 months later, she doesn't own her house anymore, and the monthly payments stopped after 4 months, and when she called Walter Greer, the number was disconnected." The radio kept playing. The two stylists kept talking in the back. Everything looked exactly the same as it always did, and nothing was the same at all. "The woman under the dryer," I said. "I've seen her before. She came in once with a man. I think it was Walter. They sat in the waiting area for about 20 minutes and then left. I remember because she kept watching my client at the time, who had also recently become a widow." Donna set the comb down again and picked up her scissors. "To anyone watching, we were just two women talking about nothing important. I don't know what she is. A lookout. Someone who confirms you showed up. I don't know." I thought about the folder in my bag. 11 pages, tabbed and flagged. Walter had been so patient. He'd never pressured me. When I said I wanted more time, he said, "Of course, take all the time you need." When I asked questions, he answered them thoroughly, slowly, with a kind of gentle expertise that made me feel both educated and slightly foolish for asking. He remembered the names of my grandchildren. He asked about my garden. He had been kind. He had been patient. I had trusted him. And somewhere in the 8 months I had spent going over those 11 pages, I had never once considered that the patience itself might be the method. "What do I do?" I said. "You're going to finish your appointment," Donna said. "You're going to let me finish your hair. You're going to pay. You're going to hug me like you always do. And you're going to walk out the front door. And you are not going to your 2 o'clock. He'll call. Let him call. He'll think." Dorothy. She met my eyes in the mirror again, and this time she held them. "Let him think whatever he wants. He is not going to have your house." I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. I did not cry. I'm not sure why. I felt like I should have, felt like there was something enormous pressing behind my sternum that probably deserved tears. But I just sat there with my hands in my lap and watched a cloud move across the sky above the strip mall and tried to understand the shape of what had almost happened to me. 8 months. He had invested 8 months in me. That meant the house was worth more than 8 months of his time. That meant this was not casual. That meant there was a system, a method, a machinery of patience and gentleness and well-timed vulnerability that had been operating around me for 8 months while I thought I was simply making a careful financial decision. I thought about the woman under the dryer. I wondered how many times she'd sat in a salon or a coffee shop or a parking lot watching some other woman who didn't know she was being watched. I thought about Walter's eyes, the way they'd crinkled at the corners when he laughed. I had found that reassuring. I had taken it as evidence of warmth. It had not occurred to me that warmth could be rehearsed. I drove home. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table and looked out at the garden and didn't drink it. At 2:15, my phone rang. "Walter." I let it go. At 2:40, he called again. I let it go again. That evening, I called my daughter. I told her everything. I heard her breathing change about 4 sentences in that sharp, controlled inhale that meant she was frightened and trying not to show it. She didn't interrupt. She let me finish. Then she said very quietly, "Mom, I'm so glad you didn't go." "I almost did," I said. "I know." I had the folder right here. I was ready. "I know, Mom." There was a silence between us that held about 20 different things. Her worry, my embarrassment, the 2 years since her father died, all the ways we had and hadn't talked about how I was managing. I had spent those 2 years insisting I was fine. I had turned down offers of help and deflected expressions of concern because I was 64 years old and I had run a household for 35 years and I did not need to be managed. And I had merely signed my house away to a man I'd met at a cookout. "I'm going to look into him," my daughter said, "and I'm going to call you tomorrow." She called at 9 in the morning with things I hadn't known and some I had suspected. Walter Greer had been the subject of a consumer fraud complaint in a neighboring county 2 years earlier. The complaint had not resulted in charges. There was another name attached to similar arrangements in a county north of us. She wasn't certain it was the same person, but the method was identical. Widows, cookouts, and community events. Life estate arrangements, monthly payments that stopped. The woman Donna had told me about was not alone. My daughter wanted to file a report. I said yes. I want to be honest about what the next few months looked like, because they were not simple. Filing the report was straightforward enough. What was harder was sitting with what I'd come close to doing. Not the legal piece of it, the emotional piece. The way I kept turning over those 8 months in my mind, replaying conversations, looking for the moments where I should have seen more clearly. There were things I had noticed and not examined. The way he always had an answer ready. The way he never pushed because he didn't have to push. He had calculated exactly how much patience it would take. The way he said the word women. I had been lonely. I had been tired. I had wanted someone to tell me there was a system that would make things easier, and he had provided exactly that. That's not stupidity. That's grief. That's what 2 years of managing alone looks like when someone finally offers to help carry something. But I want to be honest about it because I think there are women who are reading this, who are sitting somewhere right now with a folder in their bag and a 2 o'clock appointment, and a man who has been very patient and very kind. And I want them to know that the patience is the method, the kindness is the method, the way he makes you feel slightly foolish for asking questions is the method. All of it is the method. The detective who handled our report was a woman in her mid-40s who had a no-nonsense efficiency I appreciated. She told me that cases like this were more common than most people realized and less frequently reported than they should be because women were embarrassed, because they felt they should have known better, because the gap between almost happened and actually happened felt too thin to justify involving anyone official. I understood that exactly. 6 months after that Tuesday morning, there were 3 formal complaints against Walter Greer in 2 counties. The investigation was ongoing. I was told I would be contacted if anything moved toward charges. I still don't know the outcome. Some things don't resolve cleanly. Some things stay in process. What I know is that I still have my house. I know that the garden my husband and I planted in 1987 still comes up every spring. The peonies first, then the irises, then the black-eyed Susans that grow wild along the back fence, no matter how many times I've tried to contain them. I know that I had 40 people in this house last Thanksgiving, including 2 grandchildren who are now old enough to have opinions about the food, and a son-in-law I have, over time, come to tolerate with genuine warmth. I know that every 6 weeks I sit in Donna's chair and we talk about everything and nothing, and every time I leave I hug her a little longer than I probably need to. She saved me 8 months of patience and 11 pages of fine print and 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. I had a small thing framed and hung in my kitchen where I see it every morning with my coffee. It's just a note I wrote to myself the evening after it happened, when I was sitting at the table and the untouched coffee had gone cold. It says, "The kindness was the method. Remember that." I wrote it so I would never forget. I also wrote it so that if anyone ever sat at my kitchen table and told me about a man they'd met at a cookout, I'd know exactly where to start. I still think about the folder sometimes. 11 pages, tabbed and flagged, sitting in my bag like it was nothing, like it wasn't the thing that could have taken everything my husband and I spent 35 years building. What I've come to understand is that nothing about what almost happened to me was random. Walter didn't walk into that cookout by accident. He didn't choose me by chance. He had looked at the circumstances of my life, widowed, alone, a house worth more than I'd ever expected, and he had made a calculation. He had decided exactly how much patience to invest and exactly which words would find the gap in my defenses. And the gap he found was real. I was grieving. I was tired. I wanted someone to tell me it was going to be easier. That's not a character flaw. That's just what loss does to a person. But I've had to sit with the knowledge that my vulnerability was someone's business opportunity, and that sitting has not always been comfortable. What saved me wasn't luck, though luck played its part. What saved me was Donna. 30 years of showing up every 6 weeks, 30 years of her paying attention to my life in the quiet, continuous way that people who love you actually do. She noticed the woman under the dryer because she notices everything. She said something because she understood, without my having to explain it, what was at stake. That kind of integrity, the willingness to say the hard thing when the hard thing needs saying, even when it would be easier to stay out of it, is rarer than we talk about. I don't take it lightly anymore. I've also had to be honest with myself about the places where my own judgment failed. I had noticed things, the answer always ready. The gentleness that arrived exactly when I needed it, the way he said the word women. I had noticed, and I had chosen not to look directly at what I was noticing, because looking directly would have meant asking harder questions, and I wasn't sure I wanted the answers. That's the part I've worked hardest to understand. Not Walter's deception, but my own willingness, in certain moments, to not quite see. Clear thinking is a practice, not a gift. It requires asking the uncomfortable question even when the comfortable answer is right there, ready to be accepted. I am slower now. I am more deliberate. I ask the question I don't want to ask. And then there is the matter of what came after. Filing the report, making the calls, sitting with my daughter and going through everything out loud even when it was embarrassing, even when I could hear in her voice the fear she was trying to manage. I did not want to do any of that. I wanted to close the folder and move on and not think about how close it had been. But I did it anyway because the woman Donna had told me about, the retired schoolteacher, 67 years old, had lost her house, and I could not know whether saying something might matter to someone else down the line and decide that the discomfort of saying it wasn't worth it. That's the only way I know how to describe what made me follow through. Not courage in any dramatic sense, just the refusal to let what was hard become a reason to do nothing. The peonies came up again this spring, then the irises, then the black-eyed susans, wild along the back fence, exactly where they've always been. I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee and looked at the garden and thought about all the springs it had taken to get here, and about the note on the wall behind me, and about Donna, and about what it means to still be standing in the house where you planted everything you love. Some things, once you nearly lose them, you never take for granted again.